What if your fairy tale ending wasn't an ending at all? But the start of a new story, yet to be told.
I love that music. Whenever I hear it, I think of you.
Whenever I hear it, I think of us.
My first crush was in elementary school, and he was just a popular guy.
His name was Dylan, and someone was like, "Hey, Dylan," and I looked over, I'm like, "Oh, he's cute."
So as a kid, I had many crushes growing up because I can't make up my mind.
My first real crush was when I was 6. Beautiful girl, really smart.
Well, it hit me early. I was very young. Her name was Luann. She had a cute smile.
Everybody had a crush on her. She was like the popular girl.
And I remember when she broke my heart, it was bad.
Growing up, there was Thomas, half Filipino, half French, with short curly brown locks and a smile that could charm the entire playground. Not to mention, he was also the star pitcher of his Little League team. He was my first crush at 5 years old, and he was going to be my first boyfriend. That is, until he wiped the morning boogers from the corner of his eye with his stubby little fingers and made me smell it. That was the moment I knew he wasn't the one. Then came Sean in 4th grade. He was half Chinese and half Scottish. We had the same class, collected Pokemon and Star Wars cards together, and we even went to the same dojo where we mastered the art of karate together. He was my Daniel LaRusso and my longest crush of 3 years. Sean, well, he was obviously going to be my first boyfriend, my meant-to-be black belt soulmate. At least until I realized he was never going to pick me for 7 minutes in heaven. Because to him, I was just one of the guys. So who ended up being my knight in shining armor? Well, let's just say he was more like a jester who had a lot of tricks up his sleeve, and I unfortunately became one of them. My name's Mia, and welcome to Happily Nearly After, the raw, untold fairy tale of what happens when happily ever after comes to an end. Join me on my humorous, unhinged healing journey after ending a 14-year relationship, stumbling through the uncharted realm of singlehood, a life I haven't lived since I was 16, by the way, and unexpectedly discovering an everlasting love in my 30s. Whether you're feeling stuck in a relationship and need the courage to choose yourself, redefining who you are while healing, or perhaps you're a hopeless romantic, here for a hilariously adventurous life story. Happily Nearly After is here to inspire, support, and remind you to never settle, especially when it comes to love. So get ready to slip into your best velour tracksuit, throw on a breezy trucker hat, and dust off your Apple iPods. Because in today's episode, we're traveling back to the early 2000s, where my fairy tale first began. Back then, I obviously thought love was as simple as riding off into the sunset and living a happily ever after life. But I guess the joke was on me when I realized I wasn't headed to some majestic castle, nor was I on a horse, but I was on a one-way roller coaster ride to the kingdom's infamous carnival. So without further ado, it's time to hop on and hold on tight, because this magic carpet ride is flying all the way back to the scorching summer of '04. Once upon a time, in a realm filled with teenage angst and scandalous tales of forbidden love, there was an enchanting kingdom called high school.
My favorite memories of high school are, when you had like lockers, the little notes, when you had a crush on someone or dated a boy and you wanted to leave him a love note. I got so excited opening my locker to see if there is some note. Yeah, most of the time I actually had notes. There was always something. And I think that was the most romantic gesture that I've ever had in high school, because I feel like notes are just the cutest thing ever and they just brighten up your day.
I definitely was the one who used to love writing love letters. I wrote a whole lot of them. Never made a mixtape. I made a playlist on Spotify once, and it's not the same. Now I feel like I'm somebody who leaves a lot of post-it notes. Sometimes it'll be like a scavenger hunt type thing where one post-it will lead to another one, and at the end of it, it's either just like a small little chocolate gift. But yeah, definitely post-it notes now.
It was the last day of 10th grade, and the final bell rang throughout the kingdom, and the blissful 2 months of summer had officially started. Everyone began to flock to the beach like a herd of partygoers, ready for Coachella. From the privileged royals to the muscular knights, know-it-all wizards, and of course, the degenerate outcasts. Because who else was going to supply the low-grade booze and contraband? Everyone who is anyone was there. Everyone except for my friend Leia and I. We decided to take the long scenic route to the beach, while sipping on our spiked Slurpees and stuffing our faces with slices of double pepperoni pizza. Because since when does anyone show up early to a party? Turns out, everyone but us that day. By the time we got there, it was a hot mess, and not in a sexy girls gone wild kind of way. It was more like an unhinged jungle scene straight out of a National Geographic episode, untamed and chaotic. The honor roll wizards were passed out everywhere, miscalculating their alcohol intake, while the outcasts of the kingdom were hallucinating, gathering people to stare at some figure ascending from the sky like it was Jesus or something. And as for the royals, well, they were busy being royals, sipping on their fancy cognac and bobbing their heads to Tupac's Hail Mary, all while sitting front row to the Knights Gladiator match. Someone even had a handycam documenting the entire party in their best Steve Irwin impression.
We have here the average Alicia likes to come to beaches and get hammered.
It was crystal clear we had stepped beyond the confines of our enchanted realm and were now in the Darklands, desperately in need of a magical fairy godmother. Thankfully, social media was not a thing back then, because this beach party would have been viral worthy, and not in a good way. As Leia and I watched the chaos unfold, I spotted a familiar face in the distance. It was Sir Ian, shirtless with his six-pack glistening in the sun. No damsel was immune to his magical abs. A few squires weren't either, as they all gave the obvious sunglass dip as he walked by. Some were even brave enough to approach him, raising his veiny bicep like it was some kind of royal greeting. Unfortunately, the spell was quickly broken when everyone noticed he was holding hands with a tall and elegantly beautiful damsel.
When we got to high school, it's still liking the cutest guy in school. You would think that there's so many guys to choose from in high school now, right? And it's always the jocks, like the tall, athletic, good-looking guy that every girl wants. But obviously, I haven't bloomed yet, so I didn't have a chance.
Sir Ian was always known to be one of the more attentive and charming knights in the kingdom. Some would even say he had the body of Hercules. My mother even fancied his charming nature as he would walk me home after kingdom hours. That being said, the bond him and I shared was strictly platonic, mostly because a close friend of mine was deeply in love with him. So he was clearly off limits.
I don't think I really told anybody about this, but just because it was like everybody had a crush on her. She was like the popular girl. One of my best friends had a crush on her, and they were like going out for a little bit. What is grade 5 dating, just like holding hands and playing tag. A new kid came to school, and then he had a crush on her, who was also my other good friend. But they were just all fighting over her until like this new girl came to school, and then they all fell in love with her. Even back then, I knew when things were too messy just to stay out of it.
As the party continued in its madness, I started to notice someone was missing. Steve, the kingdom's famously known jester. I approached Ian asking where Steve was, and he did one of those eyebrow raises as he immediately teased me, asking why this sudden interest in Steve. I laughed it off, wondering why did I even care? Part of me questioned if in my twisted mind, I was somehow transferring my forbidden feelings for Ian to the person closest to him, Steve, the jester. I'll never forget when I first saw Steve in the halls of the Enchanted Kingdom. I remember thinking, wow, that guy really looks like the magical gecko on his shirt, with his dark, bulging eyes and otherworldly charm. Who would have guessed? A jester to be Sir Ian's closest confidant. Over the span of the summer, Ian annoyingly played Cupid by continuously inviting Steve and I to his fun-filled gatherings. I can't say archery was Ian's strongest suit, although as the summer progressed, Steve started to actually grow on me. I guess you can say I developed a little bit of a crush on him, but mostly because he was always in proximity. I can't say geckos were really my type.
In high school, when I had a crush on my now husband, my friends knew, and my friend was the one that kind of orchestrated something. So he invited me over to his house to play a game and invited him, knowing that I had a crush on him. We were almost like forced to be in the same space together.
Yeah, I think proximity plays a lot into that. If I'm constantly spending a lot of time with a female friend, it's only natural for somebody to catch feelings for the other. Unless they've had like a really good relationship so far where they've respected the boundaries of it.
Despite my newfound feelings for Steve, I still found every excuse to avoid one-on-one hangouts with him. Because as much as I loved the idea of having a summer fling, I couldn't let my feelings grow. Because it's not like I was allowed to even have a boyfriend back then. So the excuses became a great way to keep him at an arm's length and avoid all risks and complications. Or so I thought. Over the weekend, Steve suggested we go for a run at this giant park by my house, which I thought was absurd. Like, hell no. Who does this guy think he is? There was no way I was going to run up that soul-sucking hill. Like, excuse me, but I've got asthma. Then it hit me. I clearly lost track of the many ways I was trying to impress Steve, who, by the way, was an active long-distance runner. I guess I probably shouldn't have told him that I too loved going for hour-long runs. That's when I realized my feelings for him ran a lot deeper than I thought. I mean, I was barely able to run a block, let alone up a hill. He obviously caught on, and the phone calls were non-existent shortly after.
There are definitely people that I've seen in my life over the years that I've been interested in that I didn't get to be with. But I remember at a very young age, I was like, oh, I'd love to be Lori's boyfriend, quote unquote, and that never happened. So it feels like a loss at some points or just a missed opportunity, but it hits differently because you don't have influence or control over these things that much. And it's not to say that it's all this heavy and all that stark. It's just sometimes you can't get with that person today. Maybe you can another time.
The spellbound days of summer was finally over, and everyone marched back, taking their rightful places in the kingdom. From the royals to the commoners, everyone gathered the halls with crumpets in hand as they eagerly spilled the tea on their summer escapades.
No way, I can't believe it.
As for Steve and I, the unspoken tension lingered. We went from talking nearly every day to having zero communication. All that remained were stolen glances and fleeting moments of what could have been.
We met in high school, in grade 8.
We had every class together in grade 8. And he thought that I was a year older. And it just so happened that the class that I ended up going into was the same class he was in.
We had 90% of our classes together, and I made it a point to flirt with her every chance I got. And at the time, she had a boyfriend.
I, at the time, had a boyfriend. We were dating in grade 7. Like, I don't think that counts, but sure, we'll count him. He was my first boyfriend. And I was in a relationship at the time, and he didn't care that I had a boyfriend, and he was like, that's gonna be my girlfriend. And I, at first, was like, ew. Like, who is this guy?
Then one fateful day in English class, something happened. Miss T, the teacher of myths and metaphors, handed everyone half a line from very Shakespearean plays.
My bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love as deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite.
The challenge was to find who had the second half to complete the sentence. I looked down to read my half. It was from Romeo and Juliet, and the line went something like, "Did my heart love till now?" I immediately thought, how typical. Of course, I'd get a parallel love story about forbidden love. The question now was, who had the other half?
"O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo?"
After what felt like an eternity, everyone found their other half. Everyone except, you guessed it, Steve and I. Out of everyone in class, did it really have to be him? I could feel the heat of awkwardness rush to my head as he slowly approached. We pieced our halves together, and the line read, "Did my heart love till now? For an heir saw true beauty till this night." It was a match. Steve was my other half. Whether it was a serendipitous moment of destiny or just a mere coincidence, one thing was for sure. Steve and I had unfinished business.
He just kept trying to pursue me. He kept talking to me. He kept flirting his way through, and we became friends. Because we had every class together, naturally, we became friends.
But we weren't together yet. Long story short, I basically worked it so that they'd break up. But not in an intentional way, you know, what a 12, 13-year-old would do. Innocent little flirting.
And eventually kind of said, hey, like, I'm single now, without knowing that around that same time, one of my best friends also interested in him. And so I let go. And they ended up dating, which would be like a 14-year-old dating, which is that they talked and he walked her home and carried her bag for her. And they stopped talking, but we continued to talk.
Our energies vibed and we clicked. Yeah, it just worked. Our interests in each other lined up.
That summer, I think it was a lot more intense, and I felt that intensity. And that's when I said to myself, like, I think I love this guy because I'm willing to gamble my friendship and potentially lose a friend over a guy. That sounds terrible, but I guess it was a good gamble because 2 decades later, we're still together.
Perhaps distance really did make the heart grow fonder, and the special moment of happenstance in Miss T's class just added to the emotions. I even found myself glancing Steve's way during soccer practice, thinking how much he resembled Cristiano Ronaldo. Somehow, the big-eyed gecko started to look like one of the most handsome soccer players in the world. The delulu was definitely hitting hard.
My type, growing up as a girl in the 90s, it was all about the boy bands. I love the Backstreet Boys. My first love is Nick Carter. And I always thought, yes, like I want a blonde man. I want someone that looks like him. And then I also loved Zach Morris from Saved by the Bell. Did not know he was part Asian. And so lo and behold, somehow found this guy in high school. I knew him, I noticed him, but he wasn't really anyone I was interested in until the very end. And he happens to be half Chinese and half Caucasian.
I 100% had a type. And my type was a blonde, preferably with light-colored eyes. And if they were a person who was somewhat into sports, whether it be playing a sport or a cheerleader or somewhat connected to sports, I am locked in on this person. That was my type in high school. 100%.
Welcome to the early 2000s, where there was no Wi-Fi, Spotify, or WhatsApp. Instead, it was an era of screeching dial-up modems, which actually forced a lot of us to learn patience, especially when someone in the house picked up mid-connection. As for music, we had Napster and LimeWire, where we bootlegged our favorite songs. And for messaging, well, we had the iconic MSN Messenger, which was really the best way to stalk your crush back then. And I'm sure a lot of us would plead guilty to waiting around the computer with our hearts pounding in anticipation for that green light that our crush was finally online. Unfortunately for me, Steve was immune, and all I ever got was an anticlimactic hey or what's up before he vanished into the realm of offline users. I eventually grew tired of all the nothingness going on between us that I decided to save myself from future heartbreak. I casted the no contact spell. It was guaranteed to banish all thoughts of Steve once and for all.
MSN was fantastic. It gave people kind of a screen to hide behind. And so you were able to be a little bit more bold, a little bit more brave when you're talking to other people. Whereas in person, you would be way more shy. You might not be as forward. So MSN was a fantastic way to try to get your crush to notice you, talk to you, have conversations that you might not even have in real life.
The no contact spell was working like a charm, and it helped that the kingdom was always filled with endless distractions.
She said she saw the two of you together.
I don't know what she saw.
From love quarrels to simmering juicy scandals, and of course, the eye-catching eligible knights who paraded down the halls.
Yeah, they're so handsome.
By the end of the week, I was like, Steve who?
Sure.
Instead, Sir Liam, a valiant knight and basketball all-star, had approached me. He was slightly nervous, trying to play it cool, but I knew exactly what was about to unfold. I was about to shut him down, not because he was creepy, but because Liam was one of Steve's closest companions, and I wanted nothing to do with a jester whatsoever. But alas, that was not what happened, as the people pleaser in me strongly let the word yes slip from my lips, and I was now committed to going on a date this coming weekend. How was I going to get away with going out with a boy and going on a date without my parents finding out? I needed an elaborate plan stat.
Did you ever go on a date with someone in high school who you weren't really into? I think everyone I dated. No, there was always something I did like about the person. So it was never like a pity type of thing. I don't think I've ever did that. I always liked something about the person, but to be honest, it always started with them liking me. It was never the other way around, except my first love. But yeah, it was mostly them falling in love with me or like falling into a sensation with me and me saying yes because there was something I liked about them always, but I was never really into them.
The weekend came and I had the perfect plan for my date with Liam. My dad would drop me off at my friend's, and from there, Liam would pick me up and we'd begin our secret rendezvous. Apparently, he had planned the whole night for us. And the best part, there was no way my parents would ever find out. Our first stop was to the movie theaters, where Liam took me to watch a comedy called Fat Albert.
I'd like to get the VIP combo, please.
He made sure to keep me from getting hangry by ordering the VIP combo, which consisted of a large bag of popcorn, pop, and a candy. Although I was surprised he didn't try making a move on me inside the theater. Instead, he was so into the movie, I started to wonder if he forgot I was even there. But he made up for it after, when he took me to the fanciest feast his wallet could afford. Good old Swiss Chalet. At 15, Swiss Chalet was considered a Michelin star restaurant, at least compared to the typical fast food joint where most dates ended.
We were two broke kids who couldn't afford anything, and we had a favorite restaurant. So for her birthday, I reorganized and redecorated my bedroom to look like a restaurant. It was candlelit dinner, and it was just this one pasta that we shared, rose petals everywhere. It was really cute. It was really nice. You know, I think that was the start of our relationship, essentially.
So Liam and I romantically shared a rotisserie chicken, some baby back ribs, and a sundae. I thought, wow, this was just the date I needed to get over Steve. But I wondered, when was the spark of magic going to ignite already? After dinner, Liam suggested we take a stroll around the serene lake nearby. But before I could even think about it, my Motorola flip phone wouldn't stop ringing. And I knew it wasn't going to be good news. So I hesitantly picked up. And turns out, destiny was calling to end our date. as I could hear my friends hysterically crying on the other end, telling me I just got busted.
Like many immigrant families and households, parents are really strict, especially if you were a girl. I was not allowed to date anyone. I was to focus on my studies. So I secretly dated someone and I had to lie and sneak around. That was just our reality. We would say, I'm playing whatever sport or I have a project. Like I had to lie to go to the park with my friends.
The season of the Kingdom's annual square dancing waltz had arrived. And of course, my first partner was Steve. He began rating all the damsels as we awkwardly waltzed our way across the gym. Then just before we parted ways, he scanned me up, down, and all around before casually declaring me a solid 7 out of 10. The audacity of this bug-eyed gecko was getting out of hand, and he needed to be put in his place. But before I could even hit him with some sass, he told me I deserved someone better than Liam. His timing couldn't have been more perfect as he square danced off with his next partner, leaving me wondering what kind of game was this jester playing. He knew he had me hooked.
So in high school, and remember everyone, this is high school, this is not today, there was this frame of mind that I had that was very much like, I can get away with anything. And I'm playing sports all the time, and I'm the captain of my teams, and just because there's a goalie doesn't mean you can't score kind of mentality. And so that kind of leads to potential love triangles where I'm the extra person in a story that's welcoming of me being there and sometimes not welcoming. And have I been the one chosen at the end of it all? Yes. I've also been not chosen. And the overall sentiment I could say is, cool, you were chosen. Are you still together? Is life good for everyone involved? In those situations, you kind of learn what is okay in a situation and what is not okay, and some lessons that you apply and that you don't repeat.
Even though my feelings for Liam weren't exactly romantic just yet, he was safe, kind, and I enjoyed his company, whereas Steve was an anomaly. He had a way of stirring up emotions inside of me that made me feel so unstable. Liam was hands down the smarter choice to everlasting love. If only the romantic feelings could grow already.
So I remember my mom picking me up. I sat in the car and I was like, Mom, this boy just kissed me and I don't know how I feel about it. And she goes like, well, do you like him? I was like, he's nice, yes, but I'm still thinking about my first love. And then she goes like, you should try it, like give it a try. Go out with him, see how you feel about him, see if he's nice. I definitely went out and tried. But it never worked because I was still in love with my first boyfriend or my first love. And it was never what I needed, I think. And I was missing the spark from my side.
But of course, the delay was all for good reason, as destiny was once again busy in the background, whipping up another twist of fate. This time, the message came in the form of a commoner who spilled the tea in exchange for a $1.50 bag of chips. Turns out the jester himself apparently caught feelings. During lunch, Steve and I found ourselves walking in circles around the kingdom in the pouring rain. And as much as I hated how my wet flare jeans were sticking to my legs, there was something romantic about the two of us taking a stroll in the misty downpour, walking side by side in complete and utter silence. Yes, that's right, Steve, the kingdom's jester, was undeniably frazzled. By our fifth lap, I couldn't tell if he was still gaining the courage to ask me out or was second guessing. The tension was weighing so heavy, it felt like Steve and I were stuck in some curse, unable to move forward.
I think that once it's said that one person has feelings for the other, it would be next to impossible to salvage that friendship, because once that cat is out of the bag, it's hard to stuff that back in. I think it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time apart to get over the feelings that's developed.
I could not have been more relieved at the sound of the kingdom's majestic bell summoning us back to class. as I was ready to rush my royal tush out of there. But as we were about to part ways, he stopped me in my tracks and quickly confessed.
I've liked you since the summer. Want to go on a date with me?
I pretty much heard white noise shortly after. Did my summer crush just admit to liking me too? And of course, I completely missed the part where he actually asked me out. So he had to ask me again. Although I didn't want him to know I was that into him. So I stayed calm and collected, totally unfazed, and I even paused to think about it.
You don't say anything? I have just told you that I love you and you don't say anything?
No, I'm afraid to. I'm afraid I might wake up.
Oh, how the tables swiftly turned. And it was now the jester, anxiously waiting. But after a drop or two of him nervously sweating, I finally said yes. That moment with Steve was like a scene straight out of a romantic movie, where the two main characters finally see each other in a different light and realize this could be something special. There could be something more between us. But for me, it was like a dream come true. I finally liked someone who actually liked me back.
Lori was one of the first people I fell in love with in my life, and there was a time where I think she knew that I had a crush on her, and she sparked me by inviting me to sit next to her on the bus. And when I sat next to her on the bus, I was excited. Oh my gosh, a girl I have a crush on invites me to sit by her, and she tells me, I think I like you. And how do you feel when someone tells you, I think I like you? You feel invincible. She gave me a kiss on the cheek. I was through the roof. I got home. If you can have a pep in your step or a swag in your drag, like I had that.
The weekend came, and Steve and I decided to plan a low-key date together. So we went with an early matinee to avoid my parents from finding out, because I might as well be homeless if I was going to get caught a second time. As for my friends, well, they felt it was best to sit this round out and support from the sidelines. Once we got to the theater, Steve decided to pick a gruesome horror film for us to watch, called Saw 2, which was surprising coming from the jester, and the total opposite of Liam's comedic choice. Steve also didn't get the VIP combo, like Liam did. And a bit of a spoiler alert, but watching the Saw sagas became one of our traditions for years to come. The movie coincidentally ended up being like a foreshadow to our relationship, but that's a story for another episode. So there we were, sitting in a dimly lit theater, with our hands subtly touching every time we reached for the bag of popcorn, like two cringy teenagers acting nonchalant while watching a movie about a twisted killer named Jigsaw. A part of me wondered if Steve purposely picked a scary movie so he could make a move on me. I mean, he could easily hold my hand, drape his arm over me if I got scared. And even though I didn't find horror movies scary, I made sure to scream at all the right moments. And sure enough, Steve's arm found its way to the other side of my shoulder as he inched closer. Although the moment didn't last very long, as the positioning was kind of awkward and wasn't as romantic as it looked in the movies. It felt like I was cutting off the circulation in his arm, so I went ahead and casually hugged his bicep instead. And his muscular, veiny arm did not disappoint.
Yeah, so my first girlfriend, we went out. I met her from Asian Avenue. I know, right? You know, we were like in high school. Our first date, we went to the movies and buy her all the food, made sure she was fed, popcorn, drinks, candy, whatever, whatnot. And then we watched the movie and it was tough for me, trying to break the ice, but I made a move on her and consensual, of course. But it was all puppy love with my first girlfriend.
Steve and I didn't really plan much after the movies. We just roamed the mall for a bit and headed towards the bus stop. Thankfully, he was with me because it was getting dark and there weren't many people around. Although, shortly after we arrived, Steve's bus came and without hesitation, he hopped on, waved me a goodbye from the inside, and disappeared into the night. My date with the jester was a complete joke.
I literally walked him home. And it's like, you still didn't know I liked you. I walked you home. I would never walk anybody home. And it wasn't even close to my house.
So in high school, if I had a car, then yes, I would absolutely pick them up and drop them off. I still do that today. So yes, pick them up, drop them off, and if I didn't have a car, we'd meet up somewhere and I'd transit with them to wherever we're going and offer to transit with them back home, especially if it was late at night, to like be gentlemanly, of course, but also make sure that they got home safe. But if I had a car, it was like full-on 5-star Lyft Uber service.
When I got home, I received an email from Steve. He was asking if I got home okay. He also mentioned how much fun he had on our date. I was surprised considering A, he left me all alone at the bus stop, and B, we roamed the mall in silence after the movie. This date honestly fell a bit short. I couldn't help but think back to my date with Liam and how that day seemed more like a date. We went to the movies, he took me out to a romantic dinner, and he even planned the whole thing. Despite getting caught and grounded, it was still way more fun. There just wasn't any feelings, at least not yet.
Sometimes I feel like there is something wrong with me, that I can't have the spark, and it's not coming, but then it comes. It comes once in 10 years for me. Genuinely, this is ridiculous, but it does come once in 10 years. But when it comes, it's amazing, and it makes me believe, and it makes me have hope that it's still there, it's still in me.
The more time I spent with Steve, the more he opened up, and our connection grew. He started to act like the jester I knew him to be again, and I found myself shifting all my attention to him, that I almost forgot about Liam. He was like an O-Town album I couldn't bring myself to put away. It wasn't all or nothing just yet. Then one afternoon, on our way to our next adventurous date, Steve asked me a question that would change the next 14 years of our lives. He officially asked me to be his girlfriend. My mind instantly raced, thinking how I was finally going to have a boyfriend and experience my first kiss. And even though he didn't ask me like in the movies with some grand gesture, I was beyond excited. This was it. This was going to be the beginning of my very own fairy tale, with a happily ever after starring Steve and I. So without hesitation, I happily said yes.
One boy that I had a crush on, he came from Canada. He was a hockey player. I did like him a lot, and he did ask me out once. It was literally magical because I just felt like he actually sees me. And I remember feeling very seen in that moment. And we had I think it was a week of this secret going out type of thing. And he would take me to his parents' house, actually. His dad loves me until today. But yeah, it lasted a week. So I remember it being very, very short. But I remember feeling very seen. And I loved it. I loved being seen by him. It's like when you have that one person that you want to be seen by and then it happens. It was just like a glimpse in the moment. And I loved it because it was everything I ever wanted back then.
But reality hit us pretty quick in the form of a big elephant named Liam. How were we going to tell him? He was one of Steve's closest friends, and Liam and I, well, we were still hanging out. He even came to my house recently, where my mom almost caught him. Thankfully, he swiftly hid behind the draping of our thick curtains until she left. He's lucky she was in a rush, or she probably would have spotted his feet sticking out from under the curtains. Steve was not impressed by the story, and he wasn't too happy Liam and I were still friends. So he took it upon himself to be the one to break the news to Liam. But despite Steve wanting to tell Liam the news about us being official, I felt I owed it to Liam to at least say goodbye. After all, he was my friend.
I thought we were friends until he put his arm around me. And I was like, friends don't do that. What the hell? And so I asked him yo, do you like me or something? And that's when he was like, everybody knows except you. Of course. Yeah, for a long time now. And I was like, oh my gosh. But it's not going to work out. I will never date you. I was like, I will never date you though. You're my friend and I never see you in that light. No, it's not possible. Damn, he never gave up after that.
So there I was the following weekend, sitting on Liam's bed, telling him I wasn't going to see him anymore. He took the news as stoically as any knight would and accepted our bittersweet ending and asked if he could give me a kiss goodbye. I politely declined as I was saving my first kiss for Steve. but I did allow Liam to kiss me on the cheek instead. As his lips pressed away from my cheek, all I could think of was how I didn't feel anything. My heart didn't race, there were no butterflies, no sensual pulse down south, and I was on his bed. He even looked deep into my eyes like he was staring into my soul. And all I could think of was if he doesn't blink soon, someone's got to give this guy some Visine. I felt nothing, and so I took it as a sign that my heart clearly belonged to Steve. It was a new week in the kingdom, and I was ready for a fresh start. I couldn't wait for everyone to know about the jester and I, but I also couldn't help but wonder if Liam was going to be okay. So I begged Steve to gently break the news to him. And Steve agreed.
Oh my God, did you hear what happened?
No, what happened?
But of course, leave it up to the jester to always have a trick or two up his sleeve. Because what was supposed to be a camaraderie-filled conversation between a knight and a jester quickly turned into a full-blown blindsight. Steve went straight for the kill. He basically told Liam he never stood a chance because I only saw him out of pity and as a friend. And Steve and I liked each other since the summer.
Steve the Savage.
The people of the kingdom acted nonchalant as they eavesdropped on the juicy encounter.
He was so harsh.
Liam looks like he needs a hug.
As you can imagine, Liam wasn't thrilled, and he was definitely hurt.
Yeah, it wasn't a nice feeling, to be honest. Like, my stomach was heavy when I went to school. I had this huge ball in my throat, like I couldn't breathe. The thing was, we were all in one classroom. So I would see the way he is looking at her, and then when we had a thing, she would see how we were looking at each other. It was just not nice, because he was like undecisive between me and her. And he did choose her in the end, which, fair enough. She was the model-looking type of girl. She was my best friend.
Yes, I have had my heart broken before. In one of my first significant relationships where the person that I was with developed an interest in someone in my friend group. It felt like I wasn't good enough for that one person. It felt a bit of betrayal from the friend in the friend circle. But guess what? A whole life later, I've fallen in love many times.
Thankfully, Liam was never one to waste any time and found his heart set on my lovely friend the following week. And just like that, Steve and I were about to officially begin our fairy tale toward a happily ever after. But of course, a story is not complete if the kingdom didn't have some surprising twists and turns that would put Steve and I to the ultimate test towards everlasting love. But more importantly, how was I going to tell my strict immigrant parents about Steve? I was still not allowed to have a boyfriend. And wait until you hear what the royal headmaster of the kingdom had to say when she found out I wanted to spend the rest of my life with a famous jester. So tune in to episode 3 of Happily Nearly After to hear the rest of my fairy tale beginnings. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow at Happily Nearly After, because every bit of love helps unlock the magic to the next batch of episodes. And don't we all need a little magical distraction here and there?